Good morning/afternoon/evening. There's a quiet, dangerous myth that we often absorb as children. Be nice no matter what. We confuse being kind with being a doormat. We call it compassion, but deep down we feel it as something else: depletion, dread, sometimes even fear. Today I want to name the line. I want to draw it in bold, loving ink. Because while kindness matters, your dignity matters more. It's one of those truths we don't learn early enough, and often we learn it the hard way. For a long time, many of us believed that being a good person meant always being available, saying yes when we wanted to say no, forgiving without apology, shrinking to keep the peace, smiling when we were actually hurting. But here's what I've come to understand. Deeply, painfully, and gratefully, every time we abandon ourselves to make others comfortable, we trade a piece of our dignity for temporary approval, and eventually we run dry. Boundaries are not walls, they're not ultimatums, they are the clearest expressions of what we value, both in ourselves and in our relationships. A boundary says, this is what's okay with me, and this is what's not. It's not about pushing people away. It's about drawing a circle around your worth and saying, I will no longer stand in spaces that require me to betray myself. The moment you set a boundary, a real one, not out of anger, but out of clarity, something powerful happens. You stop performing, you stop begging, you stop hustling for scraps of love or respect, and you start rising into the truth of who you are. Boundaries are how we say to the world, I respect myself enough to protect my peace. I honor my time, my energy, my values, and if I want others to do the same, I must model it first. Absolutely. It's not easy. In fact, it can be excruciating because people will be uncomfortable. They may criticize you, accuse you of changing, even try to guilt you back into old roles. But here's the quiet miracle. The more consistently you live with healthy boundaries, the more your life begins to align with truth. The people who can't respect them slowly fade. The people who cherish your wholeness show up and stay. And most importantly, you begin to feel safe in your own skin. Boundaries are not selfish, they are sacred. They are the birthplace of self-respect. And self-respect is the soil where everything good in our lives grows. Trust, love, courage, joy. If you want to live in alignment, start with boundaries. If you want to stop people-pleasing, start with boundaries. If you want to build a life that feels like yours, start with boundaries. Not because you're mean, but because you finally know you're worth protecting. We teach people how to treat us by what we allow. It's one of those statements that lands like a whisper at first, and then it echoes. Because if we're honest, most of us have spent seasons in our lives quietly tolerating what we didn't deserve, brushing off the disrespect, making excuses for the silence, rationalizing the inconsistency. We told ourselves maybe they're just going through something. Maybe it's not that big of a deal. Maybe if I just love harder, give more, stay longer. But here's the truth. Every time we stay silent when someone crosses a line, we're teaching them that line doesn't really matter. Every time we say it's fine when it's not fine, we are training the people around us to ignore our pain. Every time we prioritize their comfort over our dignity, we reinforce the idea that our needs are negotiable. And over time, these moments accumulate. Not loudly, but quietly, in small cracks that become gaping wounds, in subtle shifts where we find ourselves walking on eggshells, editing our words, dimming our light so we Don't make anyone else uncomfortable. But here's the powerful, sometimes painful, and ultimately liberating truth. People learn how to treat us by watching what we accept. It doesn't mean we are responsible for other people's bad behavior. We're not. But we are responsible for the standards we uphold in our lives. We are responsible for choosing when to say, this isn't okay with me. And when we don't speak up, when we don't step back, when we don't hold people accountable, we're not just tolerating mistreatment, we're silently endorsing it. Teaching people how to treat us doesn't happen through confrontation alone. It happens through consistency, through boundaries that don't bend when they're tested, through a self-worth that isn't up for negotiation, even if it means disappointing someone we care about. And yes, it's hard. It's incredibly hard, because when we start raising the bar, some people will leave, some will push back, some will call us difficult, selfish, or too much. But that's okay. Let them. Because the ones who stay, the ones who rise with us, those are the relationships built on real respect, not convenience. So if you've been accepting crumbs, it's not because you're weak. It's likely because you are trying to protect something, peace, belonging, love. But you deserve more than that. You deserve connection that doesn't require you to shrink. You deserve love that doesn't ask you to abandon yourself. And the first step, teach people how to treat you by no longer allowing what wounds you. Let's say that again, because too often we confuse the two, especially those of us who lead with big hearts and soft edges. Empathy is one of the most powerful, transformative forces we have as human beings. It's our ability to sit with someone in their pain without needing to fix it. It's the courage to say, I see you, I hear you, I don't have all the answers, but I'm here. And I'm not leaving. But empathy does not mean we abandon our boundaries. It does not mean we excuse harmful behavior. And it certainly does not mean we sacrifice our own well-being in order to carry someone else's burden. Enabling, on the other hand, is when we allow, excuse, or even protect behavior that is harmful to us, to the person doing it, or to others. It's when we blur the line between helping and rescuing. It's when we become so invested in keeping the peace or preventing pain that we stop telling the truth. Empathy says, I love you, and I believe in your capacity to grow. Enabling says, I'll absorb the consequences so you don't have to change. See the difference? One honors the other person's humanity and agency. The other unintentionally keeps them stuck. And here's where it gets tricky. Empathy without boundaries becomes enabling. It turns our compassion into self-abandonment. We stay in unhealthy relationships because they've been through so much. We excuse broken promises because they didn't mean it. We justify repeated harm because they're hurting and I don't want to make it worse. But here's the hard truth. Allowing someone to treat us poorly, even if they're hurting, isn't kindness. It's complicity. Empathy doesn't require us to betray ourselves. It invites us to care without caring, to love without losing ourselves, to witness pain without making it our job to heal it alone. In fact, one of the most loving, empathetic things we can say is, I care about you enough to tell you the truth. I won't shame you, but I also won't shield you from the impact of your behavior because I know you're capable of more. Real empathy doesn't shrink in the face of discomfort. It doesn't whisper lies to keep the relationship intact. It shows up with clarity and courage. It holds space and holds the line. So if you're someone who feels deeply, who shows up for others, who carries a heart that aches when people suffer, don't stop being empathetic. That is your strength. But remember, your empathy is not a permission slip for others to hurt you. It is not your job to absorb the consequences of someone else's choices. You are not responsible for someone else's healing, only for how you show up in your own truth. Empathy is not enabling. Empathy is love with boundaries. Empathy is presence without rescue. Empathy is powerful, but it's even more powerful when it's partnered with self-respect. That might sound harsh at first, especially if we've been raised to believe that love is soft, forgiving, and unconditional at all costs. But real love, love that honors both people, isn't just warm. It's honest, it's brave, and it's willing to say the hard things even when it's uncomfortable. Because here's what love without accountability becomes: enabling, avoidance, resentment. It's a kind of love that tiptoes, walks on eggshells, and tolerates pain in silence just to keep the peace. But that's not peace, that's appeasement. And it comes at the cost of trust, truth, and dignity. Accountability is not about punishment, it's about responsibility. And saying, I care about you too much to let you keep hurting yourself or others. I respect you enough to tell you the truth. When we hold someone accountable, we're not shaming them, we're inviting them to grow. We're saying, I see who you are, and I also see who you can become. That is an act of love, not control. And when someone holds us accountable, when they say, hey, that thing you said hurt me, or you dropped the ball and it impacted the team, it may sting, but if it comes from a place of care, it's a gift. They're trusting us enough to be honest. They're choosing the relationship over comfort. They're choosing growth over pretending. Think about it. The people who have shaped us the most, the mentors, friends, parents, partners, they didn't just cheer us on when we were at our best. They were willing to call us out when we needed it. They said the thing we didn't want to hear, not to hurt us, but to help us become better. That's love. Tough, brave, uncomfortable love. And we need more of it in families, in friendships, in leadership, in communities. Because a relationship without accountability isn't safe, it's shallow. You can't build trust in an environment where no one is willing to speak the truth. You can't build intimacy with someone who refuses to take ownership of how they show up. And you can't create change without a willingness to say, this behavior isn't okay, and I believe you can do better. Love isn't letting people off the hook. Love is looking someone in the eye and saying, I'm still here, but this has to change. It's the friend who says, you've been drinking too much, I'm worried about you. It's the parent who says, you don't get to talk to me that way and still expect support. It's the partner who says, I love you, but if you keep shutting me out, we won't survive. Those are the conversations that feel like conflict, but are actually commitment. They say, this matters to me, you matter to me enough to be real. So let's stop pretending that love means always being agreeable. Let's stop thinking that calling people in is the same as calling them out. Let's learn to live in the tension of both care and truth. Because accountability is not cruelty. It's not betrayal. It's not rejection. It's one of the deepest forms of love we can offer another person. And it's one of the strongest ways we show love to ourselves. Resentment is a warning sign. It doesn't come out of nowhere. It doesn't show up uninvited. It doesn't burst through the door screaming, not at first. Resentment is subtle. It starts as a tightness in your chest when you say yes, but mean no. It's the ache in your gut when your needs get overlooked again, and you say nothing again. It's the inner sigh, the forced smile, the words you swallow in the name of keeping the peace. But here's the truth. Every time you go quiet when you want to speak, every time you shrink to make someone else feel bigger, every time you overextend while underfeeling, resentment grows roots. And while it may wear the mask of patience or maturity on the outside, inside it's quietly collecting evidence. They never show up for me the way I show up for them. I always have to be the one who bends. No one notices how much I give. Eventually, those quiet thoughts become louder. They become stories. They become walls. And then when resentment finally spills over, it doesn't just sound like anger. It sounds like exhaustion, bitterness, detachment. It sounds like, I'm done. But here's the thing we often miss. Resentment's not the problem, it's the symptom. It's the body's way of saying, you've been ignoring something important and I can't hold it in anymore. It's not just emotional clutter, it's a signal, a flare in the dark, a sacred message that something is out of alignment, whether it's a lack of boundaries, an unspoken expectation, or a fear of rocking the boat. And when we ignore that message, we pay for it in our health, in our relationships, in our sense of self. Because you cannot carry the weight of chronic resentment and still move freely through your life. It's too heavy. So what do we do with resentment? We listen to it, not to indulge it, but to understand it. We ask, where am I giving too much and asking for too little? Where have I said yes when I wanted to say no? What boundary did I abandon for the sake of approval? What truth am I afraid to speak? Because here's the truth, most of us don't want to face. If we don't deal with our resentment honestly, it will do the dealing for us. It will leak out in sarcasm, in passive aggression, in distance, in cold shoulders, and subtle jabs. It will damage what we were trying to protect. But when we let resentment lead us back to clarity, something powerful happens. We start choosing differently. We stop saying yes to things that deplete us. We stop trying to be everything for everyone. We start valuing our needs not as an afterthought, but as sacred. And the relationships that can hold that truth, they get stronger. The ones that can't, well, maybe they weren't built on truth to begin with. So the next time resentment rises in your body like a wave, don't just push it down or brush it off. Pause, get curious, ask what it's trying to protect, ask what it wants you to know. Because resentment is not a failure of love. It's often a failure of communication, of courage, of honoring your own needs with the same devotion you offer to others. Resentment is a warning sign, not that you're broken, but that your boundaries have been broken. And your soul is asking you to pay attention. Courage is saying enough with kindness, not rage, not blame, not venom, but clarity, conviction, love with boundaries. Because courage isn't just loud. It's not always the battle cry, the dramatic exit, the speech that finally unleashes years of silence. Sometimes courage sounds like a calm voice saying, this is not okay with me anymore. It's looking someone in the eye, someone you love, someone you fear disappointing, someone you've given 1,000 chances, and saying, I can't keep doing this. I care deeply, but I also need to care for myself. And that's the hardest kind of courage, the kind that refuses to harden your heart even when it's been bruised. The kind that doesn't scream but doesn't shrink either. The kind that doesn't dehumanize the other person even if they've crossed a line, but still stands firmly in truth. Because let's be honest, saying enough is terrifying. It means you risk disapproval. It means the dynamic might change. It means you're no longer willing to abandon yourself just to keep things comfortable for everyone else. But kindness without boundaries is not kindness. Self-erasure. And when we mistake that for love, we train ourselves and others to believe that our needs don't matter, that our exhaustion is noble, that swallowing pain is somehow the price of belonging. So, courage is knowing where the line is and being willing to draw it, even if your voice shakes. It's choosing integrity over appeasement. It's holding compassion for others without abandoning compassion for yourself. Saying enough doesn't mean you don't love them. It means you finally love yourself too. It means you believe in relationships that can hold truth, not just comfort. And here's the truth. You can be kind and clear. You can be soft and strong. You can say this isn't working for me without making the other person bad or wrong, just not right for where you're going next. Because real kindness doesn't come from people pleasing. It comes from honoring what's honest. It comes from choosing what is healthy, even if it's hard. So when you find yourself at that edge, when your soul is tired, when your boundaries have been bruised, when the same pattern keeps repeating and everything in you is whispering, enough, don't wait for it to become a scream. Don't wait until you're bitter and breaking. Say it now. Say it with love. Say it with a steady heart and a voice that knows it's worthy. Courage is saying enough, not to shame, but to free. Not to wound, but to heal. Not to end love, but to invite in a version of it that no longer requires you to disappear. At some point, we all have to decide what kind of life we're willing to build, not just for others, but for ourselves. Not the life that looks good on the outside, but the one that feels true on the inside. That life requires boundaries. It requires uncomfortable conversations. It requires walking away from behaviors that bruise our spirit, even when it costs us comfort or approval. We've talked about 5 behaviors we should never tolerate, and not because we're harsh, but because we're whole. Because every time we choose silence over self-respect, tolerance over truth, peacekeeping over personal peace, we chip away at something sacred. It is not unkind to hold someone accountable. It is not cold to say enough. It is not selfish to listen to the warning signs of resentment. It is not weak to want relationships where empathy is present, but not enabling. It is not too much to ask to be treated with basic dignity. The hardest part of self-respect is that it often requires disappointing others, but the deepest betrayal is abandoning yourself. So as you leave here today, remember this. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to expect reciprocity. You are allowed to draw the line, speak your truth, and still be kind. Because love without boundaries isn't love, it's fear in disguise. And the moment you start honoring what you know deep down, that your worth is not up for debate, everything changes. Courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet strength. It's the whisper in your chest that says no more. It's the truth in your bones that says, I deserve better. And it's the grace in your voice that says, I can walk away with love in my heart and my head held high. This isn't about building walls. It's about building a life where respect is mutual, energy is sacred, and love never asks you to lose yourself. Let today be the day you stop tolerating what wounds you and start protecting what heals you. That is not just brave, that is transformational, and that is love, starting with you.